For our first session, let's welcome Calm Downs, the English Director of the Education and Society at the British Council, Indonesia. Hello, Calm.
Hello, Anna. Nice to be with you.
Welcome. So the stage is all yours.
Okay. Well, good evening from Jakarta. My name is Colm Downs, and I'm the Director for English Education and Society for the British Council. It's 10 o'clock at night here. I think I'm 12 hours ahead of you in Bogota, in Colombia, but I'm delighted to be part of this New Directions conference in South America. I don't know if you have any football matches. I don't think you have right now. It's too early in the morning. We have the Euros happening in Europe, which I've been watching late at night here in Jakarta. And I wish Colombia well in their match against Uruguay on Sunday. I don't know who's with us because I'm not familiar with this platform, but maybe introduce yourself in the chat or say hello. I've got about 20 minutes. I'm going to get stuck into my presentation in a minute. And then there's going to be some time for questions at the end. I would just say that I've been involved in English language teaching, learning and assessment for about 20 years. And I've got a particular interest in ESP and CLIL. And that is the focus of my talk today. A lot of my work has been with the British Council, but not only the British Council. I've been working as an English for academic purposes teaching fellow at UCL, and I've written some resources and one course book for Cambridge University Press. Nice to meet you, Claudia from Mexico and Andreas from Bogota. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to share my screen. When I share my screen, I can't see the chat, so you can put questions in the chat and I will deal with them at the end. But we will have hopefully about 10 minutes to have a conversation at the end of my presentation. So let's see if I can share this screen. Here we go. And I'm going to bring up my slides here. And I think I'll moderate. If you have any problems seeing my slides, I think Anna from Elfit University will let me know. So that's me. I'm Colm. And I'm going to move on to my first slide. So this is actually, as you can see, it's a report from proceedings from an ESP International Conference, which was held in Bogota in Colombia in 1977. And it was really interesting. I put the link, I think I might have to, I'll put the link in the chat at the end, but you can find this online. It's got all of the papers and all of the talks. The reason I wanted to show this at the beginning is to say that a lot of people talk about ESP being a new thing or the next thing or the future, but it has been around for a while. Even in 1977, just a couple of years before I was born, there were conversations about the importance of English for specific purposes. It was also at that time called English for special purposes, and what is the distinguishing differences, if you like, between general English and English for specific purposes, which I'm going to come on to. But definitely go back and have a look at those proceedings. So my background, as I said, I've been working in general English, legal English, business English, and ESP and EAP for quite a few years. So here a few of the things that I've done. I spent a few years teaching academic English at UCL. Back in 2008, it's quite a long time ago now, but I wrote a book for Cambridge University Press called Cambridge English for Job Hunting, and I'm going to show you an example from that book in my talk. About 6 years ago, I wrote a book called English for UN Military Peacekeepers. It was a project for peacekeepers in Indonesia, but that book is being used by peacekeepers around the world. And I know it's quite widely used in Brazil at the moment. And right now, as well as helping the development of English in Indonesia, I am supporting a global new project for the British Council called Climate Action in Language Education, which has there are some elements of that program which is looking specifically at climate and environmental literacy, and how we can develop learners' vocabulary and skills to understand and talk about and discuss climate change. So I've got a real passion for these specific areas of English, and we're familiar, I'm sure, with these acronyms. Another way I like to look at it, this is a nice sort of graphic talk, demonstrating this range of different approaches. So we've got over on the right this focus on language, maybe this EFL, English as a foreign language, all the way over to really strongly focusing on content, but just happening to deliver your academic lectures, maybe using English as a medium of instruction. But the focus is really on the content there. And those two areas that I've highlighted in pink are the areas that most interest me. English for specific purposes, often linked to jobs and employment. And it could be any job, from nursing to being a pilot or an engineer, to a peacekeeper, which I'll come on to, and the kind of specific language that those jobs require. But I'm also interested in CLIL, where there's both a focus on the content and the language. So often in my materials that I wrote around English for peacekeeping, we had a dual aim of trying to both improve the learners' military English to do their job, but also skills to be a good peacekeeper. And the skills was more of the content, and the specific English was more of the ESP. And I often see that there's sometimes a bit of an overlap in those two areas. Richards, I like this quote, back in 1989, it talks about the distinguishing feature of ESP is the delicacy of content. And I think that's going to run throughout my talk as I come onto it. My talk, I want to reference at the beginning, is influenced quite strongly from Kay Westerfield's work. She's a fantastic American academic that I have had the pleasure of meeting and being trained by, both in Jakarta and in Brazil. I was in Brazil in 2013. I think it's Braz TESOL, and they had a special ESP conference. And Kay's talk, which I'm going to reference as a framework, and how I've adapted Kay's framework, has really helped me to be a better, I think, ESP course designer, teacher, and really think about the assessment side of ESP. And obviously this is a new direction in language assessment. And so I'm going to talk specifically about what we can do as ESP tutors or course designers to effectively assess ESP learning outcomes and goals. So that's a bit of an introduction really to this framework, which is the title of the talk. So in the first part, we're going to go through, it's a practical approach. If you're designing an ESP course, the first part of the framework is obviously doing your needs analysis of that specific learner. So here we've got two stages before you get in the classroom. It's really this needs analysis stage. We talk about conducting a present situation analysis and a context analysis. So if I go into that in a little bit more detail, what do we mean by a present situation analysis and context analysis? A PSA, really analyzing your learners, we need to look at their current level of English. What do they already know? And what do they already know about the specific content area or specific job that they need these specific English language skills for? Are they already working in that area, or is this an area of work that they are aiming to enter? So what are their current skills? What are their wants? What are their needs at the moment? So what's their baseline we often talk about? What's their starting point? And again, we know that good courses should be contextualized, both in terms of the country that they're in, the physical environment that they are in, and also the learning environment for your course. When I was teaching peacekeepers in Indonesia, I literally had at one stage 1,000 peacekeepers in a huge auditorium, and was tasked with trying to teach military English to 1,000 peacekeepers at one time with a microphone. That was my context for my course, and a real challenge. How to write slides, how to do pair work when you have 1,000 students. So it's thinking about the context, both their context and your course or your teaching context, and how will that affect the course that you deliver. And then following that, logically, you're going to then move on to setting some goals and some targets for your ESP course. What outcomes will you hope to achieve? What learning outcomes will you hope to achieve for your students? What will they need to be able to do by the end of this course? And why do they want or need to learn these skills? What are the sort of motivating factors that they have? And what specific English language needs do they have? So again, quite a thorough needs analysis is required at the beginning when you're embarking on an ESP course. To give you a little bit of context and an example, so here is a picture of a peacekeeper. In fact, this peacekeeper is going to go on a one-year tour to Lebanon. I specifically used to teach a lot of Indonesians that were posted to Lebanon, and their duties were very repetitive, very specific. They had specific tasks that they had to do every day, and within each of those tasks and scenarios, it was really quite specific repetitive language that they would need to use, most of them. So you can see here, this peacekeeper is using a military radio, and in order to do that on this mission with peacekeepers from many different countries, they had to do that in English and had to use the correct military terminology for using a radio effectively. So me, as the course designer, had to really understand, what is this military radio language, and then how could I go about designing a course in order to teach peacekeepers how to use this radio and how to assess their ability to do that effectively throughout the course and at the end of the course. So the next part of the framework, after you've done your sort of needs analysis and you've set your targets, is to start thinking about designing the course and writing some specific learning objectives. Actually, I'll just go through these one at a time. So Kay Westerfield, again, these are some of her recommendations. So she talks about determining initial performance goals, and they could be quite broad, like using a radio effectively, or handling complaints. So you need to determine some of your initial performance goals, which might be quite broad. And then within those, we can dig in and get a little bit more detailed. And the next two areas. So this one is very interesting. Sort of for each of your initial performance goals, Kay talks about conducting a sort of communication task or language analysis for each performance goal. So what do we mean by that? We want to, I'll put up the next bit. Here we are. So if you imagine handling complaints as a performance goal, that is what you need to be able to do. If you think about, in order to handle complaints, there are a range of linguistic and non-verbal and sort of skills that you need in order to handle complaint effectively. So if you're handling complaints at a functional level, this is the discourse structure, you need to be able to ask for clarification to make sure that you understand the complaint clearly. If you then you can come up with a list of maybe lexical phrases and expressions which are typical for like clarification phrases and expressions, which you could then aim to teach. Those phrases and expressions carry with them typical regular kind of grammatical structures. If you were apologizing here, you said, "Oops," you might use a particular sort of tense or grammatical structure. And again, along with these functional areas, often there are particular phrases and expressions or vocabulary items that are linked to those that you would need to learn in order to ask for clarification or apologize. And then there's the paralanguage and nonverbal communication skills. So all of these elements are elements that, as an ESP teacher, you can aim to teach your students and raise their awareness of, and design tasks in order for them to practice and use. And then you can start assessing their ability to do these things well. I will just move on to the next slide. So once you have thought about all of those different features, you want to then go on to the next bit, which is designing specific measurable learning objectives for each performance goal. And I'm going to give you an example of one of them here. Let's say for this peacekeeper, by the end of my course with him, given a notepad and pencil, the peacekeeper will be able to answer the radio and accurately record a simple message, including the key details, with no more than one request for clarification. That is one of my measurable learning objectives for my lesson on radio skills for military peacekeepers. Now, when you are defining or determining and writing your specific learning objectives for your ESP learners, it's recommended that you consider at least 4 different factors. One, obviously, is your audience. Like, who are your learners? Who are they? So in this case, the peacekeeper, here we have this, the peacekeeper will be able to do this. Sorry. Secondly, you want to think about the behavior. So in this case, or when I say behavior, what does he need to be able to do? We're thinking really of active verbs. So the verbs I've got in my description are, he's got to be able to answer the radio and accurately record a simple message. So he's got to write it down. So writing notes when he's listening to that message. That's the behavior for my learning objective. And then condition, I've given some conditions. I've given him a notepad and a pencil. And then the last thing is to think about the degree in which this student or learner should be able to do the task effectively. So by degree, here I've said accurately, include the key details, not necessarily all the details, but the key details. And I've also given him a sort of caveat with no more than one request for clarification. So it's quite specific. It's a very specific way of measuring his ability by the end of that course. So thinking about the audience, the behavior, the condition, and the degree to which your learners can complete those tasks. Let me just move on to the next bit. Just on vocabulary, because I'm specifically interested in the vocabulary side of ESP, and some people think that ESP is only, and it's there are some arguments around this that really learners can only really do an ESP course at B2 or above, that you need a solid sort of general English foundation before doing an ESP course. And I think there is a lot in that, but at the same time, my experience, especially with these military peacekeepers, was that I was teaching A1 and A2 level military peacekeepers, and even as you can see here, even for A1 and A2 level peacekeepers, it was possible to design an ESP course for them, because they had a very fixed kind of set of tasks that they would be doing, and those tasks had a very fixed set of sort of vocabulary items and phrases in which they needed to learn. So they needed to learn, obviously, how to use the radio. They needed to learn this type of vocabulary. This was another exercise that we did. It was a simple dialogue where they would read this dialogue. It's a radio dialogue, and then answer the questions below. So it's starting to use some of that vocabulary. And then at the end of this task, or the next task, this is another interesting one. I'm sure most of us civilians would struggle with this exercise. It looks very simple. These are just single words, but how many of us really know what Roger or Wilco or over or out mean? But if you're a military peacekeeper and you're using a radio, you definitely need to learn those particular items. I'm very aware of time, so I'm going to have to keep going, because there's quite a lot that I wanted to say today. I'm going to move on through this framework to the next bit. So here, excuse me, this is an example of what I was just been talking about, but done really, really well, and not many people know about this. This is a UN test. It's a real exam. It's called the UNSAT, and this is for if you want to be a peacekeeper. They have a very specific exam. If you want to be, to go on a mission as an individual police officer, you have to sit the UN's police English test, and this is an example of it. And it is very specific, which is good, and it requires the candidates to do exactly what they would need to do on their mission. So here, for example, is a reading assessment where they read a patrol report, and then they are given 30 minutes to fill in the answers. You can see the questions. This is actually the question and answer sheet on the right hand side, where they are checking their understanding of this military police patrol report. So I think it's really good that there are examples that for this specific job area that the UN has developed a test. It's not a general English test. It's a test that's aligned to the CEFR, but it has question types and task types that are authentic to real life scenarios and situations in the field. Similarly, this may look like an IELTS criteria assessment sort of form. It's not. This is the UNSAT sort of assessment criteria. In order to pass, you can see here that they've used CEFR, and a lot of the descriptors are similar to CEFR, but there are some slight differences. In order to become an individual police officer, you have to get a minimum of B1 in all of these areas. The failure rate in Indonesia is about 70%. That's how challenging a lot of potential applicants find this this test. So they often sort of spend 2 or 3 weeks cramming, desperately trying to raise their English language skills in order to get through it. Okay, I'm going to move on. I got all excited about that. To a separate area. We're now on the third part of my framework, which is really beginning to more develop your resources, your exercises, your tasks. And some of the things that I think are incredibly important here are I'm going to go straight to, well, all of these, as you can see here, developing materials from those found in the target workplace, including activities that provide practice for authentic work-related tasks. So this screenshot on the left is taken from the book that I wrote for Cambridge University Press. What I wanted to flag here was that this was a real job advertisement for a real company that we got permission to reproduce for the course book. And so we were, in the task in the book, we're asking students to analyze a real job advertisement. My first task on the right here is a typical sort of language-related task, sort of designed to help students identify certain vocabulary items and learn those vocabulary items. But the second two tasks here are learner-centered. They're focused on the individual. I mean, the first question is around what skills and experience would you need? Well, this is understanding the text, but the second question, do you have the transferable skills and experience required for this job? So that's asking the learner to think about themselves in relation to this particular opportunity. And then the final task in the unit is research the market and find a number of job advertisements for vacancies that match your criteria for work, and analyze the advertisements and identify whether you have the transferable skills and experience required for the position. So we're moving from an authentic task, using authentic material, to a real, a truly real world activity, using this kind of specific ESP skills in that particular area. I know that time is running out, so I'm going to keep going. My time is running out. I will share my slides.
You only have 2 more minutes,
okay, so,
and we won't have a lot of time for questions, actually.
All right. I'm going to really wrap up. So I just wanted to, in terms of activities as well. So this was at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Turkey. I was training diplomats. And so again, with this task, I was doing a role play scenario. Again, it's learner-centered, but the idea here was, after pre-teaching them both language and skills, we ran sort of a lot of simulated, and I think this is very true for all ESP courses, giving people the opportunity to simulate that ESP situation, whatever the job is, but doing that bit of the job and filming it and getting that performance filmed, and then giving the learners the opportunity to reflect on their own performance and their language performance, getting them an opportunity to give peer feedback, and then you giving them both linguistic or language feedback, correction, and also maybe some comments on their skills and performance. I have run out of time. I was a bit overly ambitious with the content of my talk. I was going to say a little bit about evaluation of the whole project, but I'll leave that in my slides, which I'll share. And just to say that this is a framework, so all areas of this could be seen as analyze, design, develop, and deliver, but evaluate all the way through. So another way of looking at it is like this, with the evaluation ongoing throughout your steps of analyzing, designing, developing, and delivering. And that was the end of my talk. I'm sorry that I was a bit too ambitious with that, but very happy to share my slides and respond to any questions by email, or if we have 2 minutes right now.
Yes, I can. I think that we can use some of the time that we have before our next presentation if participants have any questions. However, I don't see any questions here in the chat. Um, so we have Claudia, Mirce, Andres, and Jamie. They are participants in this presentation. So if you have any questions, go ahead and take advantage of this little time that we have. We have a few
Yeah.
minutes, just a couple of minutes before our next presentation begins.
Thanks, Claudia. Yeah, I hadn't done this presentation before, so it's often I should follow my advice that I give my students, which is edit and cut, because you never have enough time. You always have too many slides. But, I will be giving my slides to the team, and they will be available.
Yes, I do
Yeah.
have a question, Colm.
Okay.
You mentioned the Common European Framework, right?
Yeah.
So all your courses and objectives are designed based on that.
No. I think that the Common European Framework is a fantastic standard, international standard to have, and I think that we are adapting the CEFR across. Many ministries of education are adapting the CEFR for teachers, for learners. Universities are using it as entry requirements, and I think it is possible with an ESP course to have specific descriptors using CFR bands for that course. But it would be a very ambitious, challenging, big kind of undertaking to do that.
Okay.
But I think the thing I wanted to point out is you need to be very clear when designing an ESP course. What is it specifically that your learners should be able to do by the end of it? And it's not only vocabulary that you're teaching as part of an ESP course, but it's often using the, it's thinking about the situations in which these learners are going to be in, and then writing. So I gave some examples of writing descriptions of those kind of scenarios, and then you can, once you have those, then you really you can start to get a good course together.
Okay, great. And also Milce asks if it is necessary for students to have a specific level of competence to join a ESP course.
Well, I think it is good in principle to have a general level of English. I think everybody needs a general level of English in order to, to get around, to work, to travel. But at the same time as developing a general level of English, your learners are all learning English to do something. That's always, I think, I always ask my students at the beginning, whether it's a general English course or an EAP course, what do you want to learn English for? And are you working in a specific area? And if are there specific, situations in which you need to learn English? So understanding what your learners need to learn English for, and what do they want to do with English, that is your ESP, because then you can start designing a course that's going to help them learn the English that they really need. There may be specific vocabulary that they need to learn, but it might be like with diplomats. The diplomat is not just about vocabulary. If you're a diplomat, you need to communicate in a diplomatic way. You need to, your body language, your non-verbal communication skills. It's not just a matter of vocabulary. Your level of formality, or politeness, your softness. There's a lot of different linguistic things wrapped up into each kind of profession, I think.
Okay. Com, thank you very much for your presentation. I think we use not only the time for the questions, but also the time in between the two speakers. So we already have our next speaker here to begin the next presentation. So thank you very much for all your time, and so see you around. Okay, Colm?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your questions, Emilci Camacho. I'm going to give up my time, but maybe you can email me, and happy to continue the conversation. Have a wonderful rest of the conference at New Directions in Colombia. I hope to be there in person the next time it happens. Thanks a lot, Anna.
Okay.
Bye
You'll be
from me.
more than welcome. Thank you. Bye.